Good. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. It's lovely to see you all in this room. And a very full room it is, capacity even. I think I went out and got extra chairs. Let's hear it all for yourselves for being here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Queen's University occupies lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. When we give land acknowledgements, we at times risk being performative or stating things by rote. To acknowledge as observational and not necessarily as rigorous or demanding of the self. As we prepare to learn today from a poet whose work genuinely reckons with the history of genocide on these lands and grapples with personal losses and the fraught messiness of reclamations in the context of ongoing settler colonialism, I encourage all of us in this room from our diverse positionalities to consider what land acknowledgements might mean as expressions of responsibility, relationship, and reckoning. My name's Sam McKegney. I'm the head of the English department here at Queen's, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 11th annual Johanna Page Lecture. This is always a highlight of the year in our intellectual community. The Page Lecture honors the literary legacy of the late Johanna Page by bringing a renowned writer from lands claimed by Canada to Queen's University to reflect on the literary process via the evocative prompt of the page. And we will see such reflection today with the page as material as land. I have a few administrative duties, so get comfy and I'll get those over, and then we'll move on to the affairs of the day, so to speak. But I would be remiss were I not to begin with sincere and copious thanks to Steve Page and the Page family and Patricia Bowles for their support of this event over its many years, and to Phil Hall, who is with us today, who is director of this series for its first decade and worked tirelessly in its stewardship, as well as the many supporters of the lecture series over more than a decade of its existence. Also special thanks to Maureen Harris, who you will see over by the door, who has published several of the Page lectures as beautiful chapbooks. And some information about said chapbooks, which you might like to consider as you walk toward the door at the end of the day. All chapbooks that are available for $10 each, cash or check. Very reasonable, even like students can purchase those. And e-transfer is also possible, so please discuss that with Maureen should you wish. And if you need a receipt, you can leave your email address and one will be delivered within a week. And because we're celebrating Johanna Page's visual paintings and otherwise, there's a special offer today, which is the Johanna Packet. For $20, it includes a copy of the 3 lectures about Johanna and her work with a copy of the 3rd book, Watermarks. So thanks to Beth Follett, the publisher, and Steve Page for Watermarks, and those are beautifully packaged by the door, and I really encourage people to pick those up. In fact, I'd like to buy one of those packages, set one aside for me. It'll be a gift for Jordan, and if there's one left at the end, I'll buy one for myself. And there's also, in honor of Stan Draglin, a giveaway copy of his Wisdom, Poetry and Prose of Johanna Page with purchase of any other chapbook. So many kind gifts coming out today in support of this lecture series. So as mentioned, Johanna was not only a gifted poet, journalist, teacher, and editor, but she was also an incredible visual artist, and you can see some of her work here today at the front of the room. Which was kindly brought by Steve. And it gives me joy at this year's Page Lecture to celebrate the official public launch of the Johanna Page Virtual Gallery, which can be accessed via the Queen's English website. And you simply go to the creative writing area on that website, follow the link to the Johanna Page Gallery, and you will find so many stunning pieces of work like Falling, number 3, from 1972 in pen and ink, or you'll see an element here of I Am Alone with My Beating Heart from 1964, oil on canvas, or Island of Night Thoughts, which is from 2010, watercolor with pencil notes. And this gallery has been put together really carefully with a lot of effort and expertise by a number of folks whom I'll mention momentarily. But one of the things that is available on the website is you can actually focus in on paintings like this that have intimate detail that includes some intimate literary writing right within the paintings. You can actually click on elements of those images and see them up close. And they are truly stunning. So great thanks to Afshin Chowdhury and the team at Purely Interactive Web Design for putting this gallery together, and as well as Jessica Traynor, who has been helping it in recent months, and Meg Bryan, who is in charge of making everything that happens in this department happen, and that is one element thereof. We're really grateful for all that work, and so I please invite people, go on this gallery and spend some time with Joanne's art. You'll be grateful that you did. Something that I believe the Page Lecture Series illuminates, perhaps as well as any event that I attend with regularity at Queen's, is the strength of the literary and artistic communities in the Kingston area, of which Queen's is grateful to be part. And we see that today. I see people seeing each other who haven't seen each other in a while and shaking hands and catching up. And we're very lucky to have a vibrant literary community like this. And with that joy, at times comes sadness. And we would be remiss if we were having this event and not acknowledging the significant losses that the creative community in Kingston has experienced in the last year. And here we see Stephen Heighton and Stan Dragland, remarkable contributors to the intellectual and creative communities here in Kingston and beyond, have oftentimes been in this room experiencing events. Both were Queen's alumni. Stan had been a Page lecturer himself, and Steve was a writer in residence with our department, and as recently as 2020 was keynote for our undergrad conference in literature. They were brilliant artists working across a variety of genres, intellectuals of the highest caliber, and genuinely kind, quite honestly fascinating people. And we were grateful to get to know them in this space. And we're working with interested parties to think on how best to honor Stephen Heighton's legacy. But today, I am honored and excited to be able to announce an initiative to celebrate Stan Dragland's momentous influence on the creation and study of literature in Canada. The Stan Dragland Scholarship in Canadian Literary Studies and Creation. From the efforts of those who learned from, admired, and were mentored by Stan, and with the support of his family, we are raising funds to create this scholarship at Queen's to celebrate those who similarly give of themselves to the literary community and to Canadian literature expressly. So if you're interested in contributing to this initiative, please consider scanning the barcode at the bottom of the sheet that's being handed out presently, which will show how one might donate. Stan was an essayist, novelist, poet, and professor. He was the founder of Brick Magazine and Brick Books. He was the author of numerous creative works and a tireless mentor to other writers. He was the author of the path-clearing study, Floating Voice, Duncan Campbell Scott and the Literature of Treaty 8, which fundamentally altered studies of Scott's poetry by analyzing it in relation to his role with the Department of Indian Affairs. He was a kind, soft-spoken member of the creative writing community who was ever welcoming of the voices and questions of others. When I last corresponded with him, he was asking, when's this year's Page Lecture, so he could make plans to attend. So we hope this scholarship initiative contributes to the efforts to honor Stan's influence on the literary world. So two other administrative things. There will be a reception following the event. There will likely be setup that will happen sort of in the last section of the Q&A. So be prepared to think your way through that noise and to focus on the conversation at hand. And there will be a Q&A at the end. So if questions arise in relation to Dr. Abel's lecture, we will be handing around a hand mic, so those who are zooming in will be able to hear those questions as well. So now I will introduce the introducer. I'm pleased now to invite to the podium Andrew Law, who will be introducing this year's Page Lecturer. Andrew is a doctoral student in the Department of English here at Queen's, whose work grapples with the decolonial possibilities that emerge from contemporary conceptual poetry in lands claimed by Canada. And I can say, as someone who happens to supervise his work, that he has an excellent chapter on Jordan Abel. So, Andrew, please.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's my great pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce this year's Page Lecturer, Dr. Jordan Abel. In part, that's because I have this very sort of vivid memory. It was about 8 years ago. I was a young, fresh-faced master's student here at Queen's, and I remember leaving a class on, I think it was a Monday morning, with Professor Armand Ruffo, who mentioned as we were packing up at the end of that seminar that there was a really talented young writer visiting campus to give a reading in the afternoon, and that he encouraged us to attend if we could. And so I remember that afternoon filing into this very room and finding myself a nice comfortable seat somewhere at the back, and sitting down and getting ready to listen to the reading and being absolutely blown away by it. And at the end, I remember coming up here to the front to say hello to the poet, let them know that I really enjoyed his reading, and to pick up a copy of his book and taking it home and sitting down to start reading it and being blown away once again by the work. And as I'm sure many of you can guess, and as some of you might remember, the author that was reading that day was none other than Dr. Jordan Abel. So, to introduce Dr. Jordan Abel. Dr. Jordan Abel is a queer Niska writer from Vancouver. His writing is highly decorated. His first collection of poetry, The Place of Scraps, won the 2014 Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize. His third collection won the 2017 Griffin Poetry Prize. And his most recent work, Nishka, won the VMI Betsy Warland Between Genres Award, and was recently announced as the winner of the 2022 Hubert Evans Nonfiction Prize. He's been shortlisted for a number of other awards that I won't have time to list today. His next book, which has been described as a novel without characters, is titled Empty Spaces, and I think is expected to release sometime next year. Dr. Abel also, in addition to his creative work, holds a PhD from Simon Fraser University and works as an associate professor in the Department of English and Film Studies at the University of Alberta. His talk today is, I believe, also called Empty Spaces. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome, Dr. Jordan Abel.
Awesome intro, thank you. I did not realize that this was the same room. Oh, wow. It feels different somehow. It feels very different. But now that I'm standing here, I think I see it. So yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, Sam, for the introductions. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for making the time to come out this afternoon. It's awesome to see so many of you. That's very cool. Yeah, I have two things to talk to you about today. Two things that are a part of this talk, and I'm honestly really excited when Sam approached me to be the speaker at this year's Page lecture. I was so incredibly excited at an opportunity to share new work that I've been working on, and that invitation came at a very particular time where I was doing new work, which doesn't happen often. I like to tell everyone that I can that I actually only write for a couple of weeks every year, and that I don't have a daily writing practice. I just write when I feel inspired to do so. And that just happened to be a moment that I was asked to do this thing. So I was so stoked at the opportunity to share this work, because I'm really very excited by it right now. And I will start out. Oh great, my slides are here. This is I have so many images to show you. It's a very image centered talk. So Yeah, you might have to. Might have to squint if you're at the back. There's some very small typefaces, and really, most of them you don't have to read. Okay, so the way this talk starts out is through talking a bit about the next project that's coming out, which is a book called Empty Spaces. It is a novel. McClellan and Stewart is publishing it next August. And it starts out with these two quotations. Both of them I'm sure you're familiar with, but the first one is from Tuck and Yang. Decolonization is not a metaphor. And the second one is from Rob Nixon. How can we convert into image and narrative the disasters that are slow-moving and long in the making? Disasters that are anonymous and that star nobody. Disasters that are attritional and of indifferent interest to the sensation-driven technologies of our image world. And I will... How does this thing work?
One of them moves it up and one of them moves it back. So
Okay.
try both arrows.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
That's the right one.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is an image from Nishka. So there is a visual trajectory in Nishka where I engage with my dad's arts. It's a one-sided intergenerational collaboration, as I say in that book, and it is work that was deeply deeply impactful to engage in. The text, of course, in this project, as you can probably see, is very difficult to read in a linear way. It is fragmented, I think, quite obviously. And there's a space at the end of Nishka where I put forward the first 1,000 or so words of this text. So the first part of this talk is that I will attempt to read to you the first chapter of Empty Spaces. And Empty Spaces is a 65,000 word novel. And I've never read the first chapter in its entirety to any audience. And I'm not sure I will accomplish it today, but I will try. And that will segue into the next part of the talk. So here we go. A deep, narrow chasm, black rocks. The river lies still on those black rocks. A mile above, there is a tumbling. There is a moment. At this very moment, there is a tumbling in the air a mile above us that runs straight through the open heavens and into some other place. A deep hollow, no shape, no consistency, no breaking some 100 feet in the air. Some places are softer than others, some 100 feet up in the air. Some right angles enter into narrow passageways, and some right angles break off a mile in the air above us. These rocks are full of cracks. Water has worked through some deep hollows, breaking here, wearing there, breaking and wearing until the chasm separates into two caverns. Some 100 feet in the air there is no danger. There is scattered driftwood and the scent of roses. There are glimpses of roses and rocks and shrubs in the spring rain. There is a steep, rugged ascent. a path that winds among the black rocks and trees. Somewhere in the air there is the scent of roses. Somewhere out there is the wilderness, a reasonable distance through scenes of greenery and nature and glimpses of mountain ranges that disappear just as suddenly as they appear. Among the rocks and trees there are mounds of earth and other rocks and other driftwood. Somewhere there is an islet and another islet and a clear sheet of water and bald rocks just beneath the surface. There are forests and straits and islets and rocks, and somewhere in the air is the scent of roses. There are crevices and fissures and rocks. The rocks surround themselves in other rocks, although there are sometimes mounds of earth in between. On the shore there are fragments of rocks. In the deeper parts of the river there is more tumbling. At this very moment the river pours into a wide fissure where it just becomes more water between rocks. Between the broken rocks and the deep roaring cavern there is a scent of roses and driftwood and trees. There is light and straight naked rocks and immovable trees. There are woods and rivers, and the bed of that river is ragged with rocks and intersecting ravines that cut silently across the water above. Somewhere in the air is the scent of roses. The woods are full of sounds and rocks and trees. The woods are full. The upper air, where it drifts over the tops of trees, is full of sounds. Just where it breaks over the tops of trees, there are slow intermingling drifts of sounds and scents that brush over the clearing some 100 feet up in the air. Rocks and logs and mounds of earth and narrow fissures and bottomlands and little ponds and pouring rain and a brook that shoots through the narrow fissures, spreading through moment after moment of stretched light. There is a bellowing in the passageways between the rocks. There are moments of admonished madness. There are moments spreading over the acres of bottomland. There are precipices and adjacent lakes and headwaters. There is a fierceness here that floats through the waters. These rivers are full to the brim. These waters stream down to our feet. In 6 hours, these waters will rush in, and in another 6 hours, these waters will rush out. Salt grows in this water. The water in the woods and on the lakes and in the higher parts of the sea, stretching out horizontally until the current flows upward like blood at the throat. On these waters the edges touch the shores, and the dirt paths trace back to the streams. In the short distance in between the water and the black rocks is a deep shadow. The breath of the stream, the glancing waters, the throat of the river, these woods are full. Gliding above, somewhere up in the impenetrable darkness is the scent of roses. Somewhere there is the sound of rushing waters ringing through the deep stillness of the night. The moon rises and the light glances here and there on the water and down to the riverbed. At times, the light hangs in the air on the breath of the river. There are dark waters, there is night. This is the unmingled sweetness of air that sinks into the foaming waters. These are the vaults of forest. There is a stillness here, somewhere in the wilderness. There is lightning, and then there is stillness. There are echoes that rush through the forest until they disappear. A mile above there is a tumbling. In the foaming waters there is the color of blood gushed from some other place, some other throat, some other softer place. Some waters carry the dead. Somewhere up in the air is the scent of roses. Some flames last forever. Some waters thicken with limbs and bodies and trembling voices. Some waters are still. Somewhere in the velocity of the uproar there is a current of air, an unmingled sweetness that sinks into the forest. The narrow path adjacent to the brook is full of bodies, the blood as natural as water. Glassy mirrors, the sunken hillsides, the shores, the black rocks between the mounds of earth, the glittering stars, the open air floating over the forest, the warm spring wind. In the valley, the stream overflows onto the banks. Here, the tumbling water washes bones, and the waters of the river flow into the sea. There is a canopy from the woods spreading over the lake, shadowing a dark current with a deep hue. When the sun is setting, these waters become healing waters, but the sun is not setting, and the current branches silently into the dark parts of the lake. Somewhere in the forest, bark is peeled from a tree, branches break. For many minutes there is a struggle and a deep, cool wind. There is a current of air. There is silent motion, plunging and glancing and sweeping over the broken branches. The sound from the rushing waters drifts through the air. There are words and yells and cries. As the air flows up from somewhere in the deep, narrow ravine, there is silence again, with the exception of the sounds that come from the rushing water. A clear tide, upstream, beneath some low bushes is a silent river. Branches wave in the current. They call this river by a name. For many moments the branches bend in the eddies, and the arm of the silent river turns towards itself. For many moments the name of the river hangs in the air. Every few yards, bubbles appear on the surface, are filled with light, and disappear. At the shore there is a dead silence, and then there are quiet voices. The voices are obscured somewhere below the ragged treetops. The rise of air, the melting pockets of snow, somewhere under the ragged treetops is the growing sound of voices. Somewhere on the river, bark can be seen floating along the current. The downstream currents, the far down current sinking again beneath the air. The current that swells and sinks and crashes against the rocks, echoing through the vaults of forest and the sweetness of nature. Still there is breath. There are voices. In the cavern below, there is air that rises. The voices are just sounds in the woods. The air, the sparks, the flames, the smoke, the rain, the cool spring breeze along the surface of the river. Thunder rumbles beyond the distant hills. Any signal, any water, any alarm far down the current. Still, the air sinks into the caverns below, and the voices sink too. What hazardous undertakings, what trusted intent, which current glides towards fortune, and which current turns treacherous? The river plunges into the ravine, and the mist rises like smoke. For a few moments, the mist is the smoke before it falls back into the river. For a few moments there is a plume of water crested by the light that cuts through the forest. Somewhere in the trees there are leaves decaying on a path. Behind the curvature of the path is a dark wooded outline and a soft silvery wind. The heavens and the drifting vapors and the broken treetops and the sullen sounds and the evening atmosphere and the blazing fire and the deep laughter and the broken rocks, and the roaring cavern, and the tumbling water, and the impenetrable darkness, and the water glimmering in the moonlight, and the hills, and the gloom, and the moving surfaces, and the quiet uneasiness, and the wooded outlines, and the soft silvery wind. There is a darkness here that can only be heard. Another voice, another river, another mouth, another body. But which mouth, which river, which body? All the knots of pine can be counted. Over there, beyond the hills and skies, spirits rustle the leaves of other forests, and the dead listen. When the blood is hot, when black smoke drifts through the camp like a fog, when the vapors are inhaled, when the clouds settle onto the trees, when the dark forest erupts into flames, when there are broken, naked voices and intense heat, breath and silence and breath again. At the furthest edges of the forest there is a cavern, a narrow, deep cavern in the rock. North and south spread over both sides of the lake. In the east there are as many trees as there are leaves. On the broad side of the trail, the air tastes sweeter, and the holy lake occasionally reflects the light of the North Star at midnight. Air and bodies and light in the fields, numberless breaths and thoughts and voices. Stars will shine at night, lighting up the bodies with antlers and hooves. Evergreens will grow. North and south will spread through glimpses of the western sky, as seen through the branches of trees, and the west will wait. Above the pines, the sky is bright and delicate. Where are the deep shadows? What forms out of the damp morning air? What bitterness, what glory, what country? The rippling stream bends towards every vista. The sun sets in a flood. Coolness spreads through the beach. The woods and the broken masses of rock and the distant western hills and the spectacle of darkness and the pure exhalations of spring and the western shore and the North Island and the mountains and the silent moments and the shaggy outlines of the tall pines and the spring rain and nearly everything in between. I think I have to pause there from this project. That's as far as I've ever gotten. One day I will, thank you, it was very kind. One day I will get through that first chapter. This is a light summer beach read, if you're into that kind of thing. And who knows what will happen when it is published in August of 2023, but I hope you read it and encounter it and see what this thing looks like in its entirety. And the one thing these are more images from Nishka that include empty spaces, and the one thing I was trying to get towards is the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, because the way this novel is structured is that, so the first chapter exists, and it's me rewriting and writing over James Fenimore Cooper's descriptions of land and landscape in The Last of the Mohicans. But then the second chapter is a rewriting of the first chapter, and the third chapter is a rewriting of the second chapter, and the fourth chapter is a rewriting of the third chapter. So it's very much about rewriting and revisiting and re-engaging with the text or the page as land. And I just wanted to point to this section and show you very quickly what I mean. And when I say rewritings, I mean they're mirror images. So the end of chapter 1 is, when the light spreads through the trees and the leaves, when there is a moment, when the bodies can be seen from 100 feet up in the air, when the river breaks, when the air is full of light, when the names of the bodies are swallowed by the forest, when a soft silvery wind rushes through the trees, when tomorrow finally arrives. And then the beginning of the second chapter is a mirror image, as I say. So all of the sentences from the first chapter are reversed, and I'm just revising them and rewriting them. So beginning of chapter 2 is, when tomorrow finally arrives, when a soft silvery wind rushes through the branches, when the bodies are swallowed by the forest, when the summer air is warm and broken, when the bodies seem to disappear from 90 feet up in the air, when there is a moment, when light spreads through the brush. So that's the kind of movement that happens in the book. And I think it's really intuitive when you see it and when you start reading it. But because I've only ever read the first 1,000 words, I've never had a chance to talk about this before. So this is the first time that I'm talking about this part of the book. And also, all of my work connects together, and all of my projects bleed into and out of each other. So this piece, if if you can, this piece might look very similar to a piece in Nishka, but it is a new piece. And my dad's art is in the center, and there's text that surrounds it. And this is, I'll just show you the first, so this is a project. This is the next project. And it's called Welcome to the World, Dear Son/Daughter Name. And it's about my dad, and it's about Indigenous knowledge transmission, and it's about my new, well, what still seems new to me. I'm a new parent. My daughter is just 2 years old, so that's what the new project is at a glance. And these are all pieces from the first section of this new project. Maybe I'll pause on this one. Okay, so after one of the launches of my book, Nishka, as I did a handful of launches for that work, my friend Uzma reached out to me to say that she thought that the sections in Nishka where my art intersects with my dad's art were the most hopeful and powerful sections for her. And that comment has really lingered with me. And at the very end of Nishka, when I'm speaking about my dad's art, I write, I wanted both of our artistic trajectories to speak to each other, to coexist together, because there were no equivalent moments in our lives. These visual pieces then were a way for me to create an intergenerational collaboration between us. So this new project, Welcome to the World, Dear Son/Daughter Name, begins with a continued interest in putting my dad's art in dialogue with my art. But it importantly adds an additional layer of reflecting on this process after having become a father myself. So as I mentioned, my daughter Phoenix was born in 2020, which was the year before Nishka came out, but it was after I had written and edited the book. So she doesn't appear there at all. And it probably comes as no surprise to anyone that's a parent, but her addition to my family was actually life-changing for me. And when I began working on this new project, I kept feeling like my relationship to my dad and his art had fundamentally changed somehow. That the birth of my daughter had changed me and my interests and how I thought about my dad's absence throughout my life. It also changed how I thought about existing in the wake of intergenerational trauma, how all of this will inevitably shape my daughter's existence within the world. So, Welcome to the World, Dear Son/Daughter Name is about what it means to be a father when my own father was absent, about what it means to continue to exist within the inherited traumas of residential schools, and about how Indigenous knowledge is transmitted when familial connections have become severed. And it's also a deeply process-based work, and all of these pieces, as you can see, probably, begin with the literal shapes of my dad's artwork. And my own writing and photos exist here in relation to those shapes. So if you take a look at this first section, you'll see my dad's art is very clearly present and central to these pages, and that my own work exists outside of or on the periphery of following the contours of my dad's art. And that's kind of how the first section of this thing works. Okay, here's some more of it. Here's more of the first section. All right, but here's the beginning of the second section. Okay, so at the beginning of the second section, probably the first thing that you'll notice is that the previous relationship has shifted and changed here. Here, the text still follows the contours of my dad's work, but my dad's work is no longer visible. It is an invisible presence that still shapes my contributions, but is also clearly absent. Likewise, the photo collages, kind of beginning in this second section, sorry. So the photo collages here are shaped by, but importantly not contained by, the contours of my dad's art. So the photos, are partly bound by those contours, but also move beyond those moments. Oops, I'm going the other way again. And here's some of the pieces in this second section. And some of them are prettier than others, and this is all work in progress, so potentially some of these will change. But I've mostly kept the initial, my first take on each one has kind of stayed the same. This is a cool one, I like that. This one I'm not too sure how I feel about, but maybe that one will change as well. So these are all pieces in the second section of welcome to the world, dear son/daughter name. Okay, and I'll pause. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at this one. Okay, so at the beginning of the third section, you'll notice that not only has the subject matter of the photo collages shifted, there's Phoenix's eye is right there. That's her, part of her face. So the photo collages shift towards including me and my family and my daughter, but the relationship has changed again. The presence of my dad's art is not as clear. The text is now defined by different vectors. The collage is shaped by other relationships. What I hope to invite here in this short preview glimpse into this project is how I'm working with and engaging with these texts and collages on the page. Also, I don't even know if folks in the front row can read this text. And certainly, those of you at the back probably, I'm seeing now. Yeah, that's fine. When you see it on the page, you'll be able to read it, I promise. It's very small. So all of the text here is sourced from anonymous inspirational quotes on fatherhood. And the text is positioned quite intentionally to comment on and critique the ways in which we construct images and expectations of familial dynamics that are misleading. And the text is about complicating the ways our collective expectations of fatherhood lead us towards unrealistic images of family, and also about attending to those moments where that manufactured affect within these lines actually resonates with us. So the text is a multifaceted approach to critiquing the cliches within this kind of manufactured sentiment, but also attempts to recognize the sometimes uncanny power that cliches have within our lives. And my hope is to disrupt and interrupt this text as the project moves forward. But I will read some of it to you so that you can get a sense of what it is. Fathers are the first friends that you make and the last love of your life. A dad is more than just the sum of his parts. He is the very soul of the family. Fathers are patient, kind, and loving. You are all of these and more to me. A dad is the anchor upon which his children stand. Fathers are men who dared to place the world's hopes and dreams in their children. The value of a loving father has no price. Dads share wisdom with their children in the hopes they spread it throughout the world. A dad is half of you, so he knows you better than you might even know yourself. Rely on his wisdom in life. Even the best dads make mistakes. There is no mistaking their love for their children. A father's love is eternal and without end. The best parts of your father are the best parts of you. Never forget where you came from. Thank heaven for the special relationship between fathers and daughters. It is blessed from above. The love of a daughter for her father is second to none. Daughters reach for their father's guiding hand their entire life. Every man a woman meets is measured through her father's eyes. Bright daughters are raised by brilliant fathers. Dad, you raised me to be a strong woman. You made me a world full of love, and for that I am grateful. Thank you for being my dad. Without you, I wouldn't be where I am today, and you are the reason for my success. Dads and daughters share one heart. The world turns on a father's love for his daughter. A daughter's love is one of a father's true joys. A dad is the hero his son hopes to be. Sons learn what their fathers teach them, to be kind, thoughtful, loving, and mindful. The joy in a little boy's eyes shines through his father's heart. The son is the clearest reflection of his father in the world. A father may only be a dad for a little while, but he is a son's hero forever. A son who is loved by his father becomes a father who loves his son. Great men are not born, but molded by their fathers and their fathers before them. No truer words were ever spoken than those of, "I love you," from a father to a son. Dads and sons are two sides of the same coin. They complement each other in ways only fate understands. Dad, you are the bravest person I have ever met. You have shown me how to be strong in heart and mind and soul, and stay true to myself. Even when my faith in myself faltered, my father's faith in me never wavered. It is only through your blessings, Dad, that I have become the person I am today. Dad, no matter where I go, I know you're always waiting for me. Dad, no matter where I go, knowing you're always waiting for me gives me peace of mind. I love that you taught me to travel. The journey I go on is one that my father paved before me. Dad, your love helps me through each day, even when I am away. I feel the love for my unborn son or daughter is no match for any love I've felt before. From the moment I heard I was going to be a father, I knew my world would never be the same. I promise to cherish and protect you before all others in this life. You became my everything before you even arrived. 10 toes, 10 fingers, 2 eyes, 2 lips, and 1 nose. I can't wait to meet each part of you. As your father, it is your heart I promise to cherish most. You reserved a place in my heart before yours was even formed. The outside world will have to wait a little longer to greet you, little one. Spending some father and daughter or son bonding time is my #1 priority. The birthday of my child is the day the birthday of my child is the day I the birthday of my child is the day I because a dad. The birthday of my child is the day I because a dad. Okay. No other day will ever mean as much to me as this one. Precious child, I have longed to be a father since I met your mother. Never doubt you are beloved. My life was not complete until I met you. Now I am whole. Welcome to the world, dear son/daughter name. Thank you. Well, that's the end. That's the end of the talk. This is my daughter. Yeah, is there, did I leave enough time for a Q&A? Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We have time for Q&A.
Oh, awesome. But thank you all for listening. One day I'll get through that first full chapter of Empty Spaces. Maybe.
Sorry, I just didn't
Hi.
catch the source of the quotes that you ended with.
Oh, okay. So
Is it
those were
hard-
all from anonymous inspirational quotes for fathers.
Not Hallmark cards or something like that.
I mean, there might be some Hallmark cards in there. They're a little bit uneven. Hello.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Cool.
What was the process like emotionally for you in going through finding the text for these things? Did you find that it was a combination of like you'd find some and maybe chuckle at them because you found them cheesy, and then another one I found as I was hearing you, it was like some of them were like, oh, like laughed them off, but then others were like, oh, that kind of stirred something, or that
Totally.
was like cheesy but made me feel something, you know?
Yeah.
So how did you find that emotionally and piecing them together?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you so much. I think it's kind of that process was totally came out of a struggle, which is that I knew I wanted to think about my dad and think about myself as a father and write about these things. And then whenever I sat down to write something, it wasn't working. and it turned out to be way more difficult than I thought it would be to write about my daughter. And so I just had this moment where I was just wondering, what are dads saying out there on the internet about their kids, about their sons/daughters? And so I ended up looking at all these things, and as you say, some of them were very funny, and I think not particularly resonant. But then other ones, actually did something, and I started thinking about that and thinking about the ways that we collectively try to imagine fatherhood or even parenthood, more generally. And I think my hope is that the text achieves exactly that sensation, of laughing at some of these things and thinking that they're not super serious, and then also having those moments where they stir something within you. And certainly it's been very complicated and interesting to try to write about my daughter. And if you've read Nishka too, like my relationship to fatherhood in particular is, it's messed up. I have all kinds. I wrote a whole book about my issues with my dad. So it's such a complicated subject matter for me, but also one that I feel I need to write about in some way. I don't know if that totally answers your question, but it was a complicated process, of trying to figure these things out, and and it was also a joyful process though, and I think that was an important distinction for me, since most of my writing, I don't think you could classify it as joyful. If that makes sense to you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I see several people all throughout.
As I bring the mic over to Laura first, can I ask a follow-up question to the one that was just
Sure.
asked, which, seeing how the various sections of that latter project, we have the evolving influence of the artwork of the father, and I'm curious if you see any aspect of this project either seeking to almost, use art to liberate from a certain form of influence that's always seemingly there, or to, I guess, take a form of control over that influence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. I think, I'm still at the beginning processes of trying to figure out this work, and I want to say that it's both in some ways, that it's both about trying to understand what the page looks like when I am visibly indebted to my dad's artwork, and then partly about trying to see what that process looks like, when those, when I'm less bound by those contours, and whatever the book is, it's about being in that middle space between those things. When I try to write the project description for this for a Canada Council grants, I will be emailing you, I think, Sam. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to talk about the first piece, which I loved.
Oh, thanks.
And I guess maybe it fits the kind of subject matter that I felt it was washing over me, But I guess I also felt like, okay, this is just, my reaction. It felt like a kind of a narrative in geologic time or in water time or some other time.
Yeah.
And it was very beautiful.
Thank you. It's time in that project, I think, is so different than human time. I absolutely was thinking about other ways of measuring or thinking through time, or representing time even.
Or maybe other ways of defining action or something
Yeah.
I thought about too.
Yeah.
But so now I'm going to ask you a question. So then you sort of gave the punchline afterwards about where it came from.
Yes.
And so there my reaction was kind of like, oh, like I had this feeling like, I wish I didn't know that. I just wanted to be there.
Oh, is it about the Jason and
So
Mark
I'm
Cooper?
So I'm curious about how you how that is stated in the book or on the back cover or whatever, and how you feel about it being possibly overriding some of the other effects of the work, or how you see those interacting with each other. I'm really curious about that.
Totally. Yeah, no, it's such a wonderful question, and I have been thinking about that, and and so the back cover copy hasn't been written yet, so it's still up in the air. So, there's no, I think the book might be up on the McClellan and Stewart website as like a forthcoming thing, but the project description doesn't include a reference to Jameson and Mark Cooper, or Last of the Mohicans, or the process that I used to initially begin writing it. And my feeling is that, my feeling right in this moment is that that's not that I'm probably not going to include that bit in the in the cover copy anywhere, or that that part of it won't be how the book is presented. And I'm happy to talk about it, but I feel similarly to you, I think. So the initial process for writing this book, the first, so it's a 13 chapter book, 65,000 words, and it's just the first 4,000 words that really have anything to do with James Fenimore Cooper or The Last of the Mohicans. And the rest of it is me rewriting my rewritings. So, you know, Last of the Mohicans and James Fenimore Cooper fall away very quickly. And, you know, I never really look back. And I think, yeah, I did talk about this work a year or two ago at something that Larissa Lai was at, and she told me that I should just throw away James Fenimore Cooper and not talk about him at all. And I wonder if maybe that's the right way to go. And also, you know, the project is, you know, it does have those like semi-conceptual roots. So, you know, it still exists within that first chapter. But it's totally something that I'm thinking about, and I think that's such a wonderful question, and I will continue to think about it. And if you have suggestions for me, I'm happy to take them. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, hello.
Hello there. Thank you. Is this, yeah, it's on?
I
Okay.
can hear you.
I mean, I think you'd hear me anyway, but, okay, so, the title of the book is Empty Spaces.
Yes.
You have a lot about empty spaces and chasms and fissures and holes and blanks in all your work, scraps.
Totally.
Yes.
Lots of scraps.
And and certainly in Nishka, and I'm just wondering about what those spaces mean for you. If you can kind of sum it up in words somehow, or not sum it up, but throw some ideas in there.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, you know, I think they kind of mean a different thing each time, and within each project, absence or empty space, you know, takes on a particular kind of character, or is present, you know, in particular ways. And in the place of scraps, it's a very visual absence, you know, since that book works mostly with erasure pieces. So there's quite literally, you know, words that are missing, or, you know, things that are clearly redacted and whited out in some way or another. And in empty spaces, I think, you know, that absence takes on a very different role. One of the challenges that I brought to myself was to try to write fiction, but without centering human characters, which turns out is so hard. You know, all of my old fiction training is about, you know, building character and writing dialogue and having interactions and all kinds, and, you know, characters have to want something, and I had to throw all of that out. And you know, instead I was left with, like, and you know, if there is a character in empty spaces, it is for sure the land. And, you know, and whatever the, you know, however the land interacts or, you know, is positioned, you know, within this world that I'm constructing is at the center of what I'm trying to think through. And I think, you know, I think the central irony, I think, that I was trying to aim for in empty spaces is that, you know, none of these spaces are actually empty, and that, you know, they're very clearly alive and thriving. You know, even, you know, if there's even if there are many moments where there are no humans present, which isn't to say that there aren't humans in the book, or, you know, other kinds of animals and animal bodies and whatnot, but they're never the focal points. So, yeah, I guess I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I'm trying to think through it. Cool, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Continuing with empty spaces.
Sure.
Just given its incantatory structure, its iterative structure, and what you've told us, Was there ever any discussion or reflection for you about whether it was a novel or not? Like, how did you sort of come to call it that?
Yeah.
What are the elements
so
there?
That's is an interesting answer, I hope. Or multiple answers, and one of those initial answers is that I wanted it to be a novel because people read novels. People buy novels. Maybe that's the more important thing. And so I was very interested in trying to write a book in which a publisher would write the word novel on it somewhere. But also, like, I am really interested in the novel as a form, and I'm interested in the possibilities of fiction. And so I really, felt like I was interested in trying to do a novel in my way. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has read a poet's novel at some point, and some of them are more novels than others. And I was leaning towards the other. Like if I was going to write a novel, I wanted it to be, a thing that I could be really proud of and interested in, and that it would do things outside of, the usual ways that novels function. And also, it has, it's all prose. So it's got one thing that's going for it. It's all prose. There are chapters. It has rising and falling action. Has a protagonist. There's a climax. There's a denouement. Yeah. It's got novel features. Yeah, I checked some boxes. It's just not with the there's no dialogue. There's no human characters that, play major roles. Yeah, it's a good question. Totally. Yeah, thank you.
Hi there, thank you so much. Just
Hello.
kind of expanding on that point, I just wanted to ask if you could speak to the multidisciplinary creative process, and is this breaking from a strict conventional genre, challenging, liberating, or emotional?
Yeah. It's deeply, deeply challenging. So, I think, if I'm talking about Empty Spaces in particular, like, I had so many false starts with this book. Like, the first 4,000 words took me 5 years to write. And that was it's just a long time to spend on 4,000 words. And the next, the other 61,000 words, took 3 years, which was less time. I kind of found my pathway eventually. But I think anytime anytime you engage in a writing project, conceptual or no, I think there's lots of moments where you can kind of imagine what you want the book to be, and it's not that. And it's such a struggle sometimes to move it outside of the place that it is. And so I met so many roadblocks in trying to figure out this project. And eventually, I kind of arrived at this idea that it would, take this particular shape, and it would have this structure, and it would be this length. And then I thought to myself, I can maybe do that as a writer, but who's going to publish this? It felt like an impossible goal to find a publisher, and I was very, very ready, I think, when I brought it to my agent to hear back from her that it would be an impossible project to sell. But she didn't say that. She said she liked it, and she wanted to see what she could do with it. And then I was ready at the next stage, when she brought it to McClellan and Stewart, that Jared Bland, who's the publisher there, would say, Nishka was great, we loved it, this is an impossible book to sell as a novel in Canada. And he didn't say that. He said he liked it, and it was cool, and that it It does this other thing. And I'm totally prepared for when it comes out next summer that, you know, everyone who picks it up will say, this is an impossible book to read. And, you know, we'll see what happens. Maybe some of you will get through it. I know Warren Carreyrou has read it 4 times, so that's something. He edited it down from almost 80,000 words, and I think it's a much better project. So I guess what I'm saying is it's possible to read. Maybe not at the beach, or maybe the beach is the best place to do it. Yeah, I mean, I'll read anything at the beach. Hello.
Well, congratulations. It's a really
Oh,
interesting.
do you want to
project.
use the
Thank
mic
you.
so that I think there might be people
Okay.
listening.
Anyway,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
very, very interesting the way you have layered things in, like it's a palimpsest. It's got this kind of combination of things that are part of, I think, your poetic spirit, that you've got words as well as emotion as well as images. And I like the way I mean, maybe I'm just going to effuse, but I like the way the part with your father's art inspired and got you going. And then this later part with your daughter has this different quality that still captures some of that still has this sort of, but it's got a different kind of playfulness to it that is less following something, but your own kind of, and it's precious. It's got this sort of, the way you've articulated your thoughts in a kind of graphic and it's got literary poetic qualities, which are very, it's a really interesting kind of interpretation of the love that flows through both relationships. So anyway, very,
Totally.
very interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sorry, I'm so inarticulate myself.
No, it's all good. I'm totally happy to listen.
Very, very interesting.
You know, I think it's honestly really lovely to hear how people think through and see the work that I've done. You know, because I can only see it from the inside.
Yeah, but that's
and it looks
it's
totally
you.
different from the outside.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
got a lovely expression.
Thank you.
Hey there.
Hello.
So I just wanted to wrap back to the couple questions that were asked about space. And I guess when you're reading the first part that Professor Laura Murray commented on, I kept thinking of the word infinity. And when you were talking about the page, approaching the page like it's land, I also just started thinking about like quantifying that. And then I was looking at your visuals and the lines moving in different directions. And I guess I wanted to ask you, do you think, or is the page infinite? Or how infinite might the page be?
Oh yeah, I love that question. You know, when I talk to people about when I talk to people about visual poetry, and when I try to teach visual poetry, or when I try to when I try to tell students how it is that I approach my writing, I often start with telling them that I think about the page as a unit. So, I don't think about the sentence, or the line, or the stanza, or the word, or the letter even. I'm thinking about what's possible on a page. And that has been a guiding force for me throughout all of my projects. I think, in some projects, the page is very much a finite space, and then in others, the page is an infinite space. And if you know, if you've had a chance to look at my second book, which is a book called Uninhabited, there's a section towards the end where I fully imagine the page as an infinitely expanding space, maybe in a kind of Cartesian sense, and I tried to capture that I should have brought images of that one, but I try to capture that through a combination of image and text that is that's full bleed, so it goes right to the margins of the page, and my hope is that the reader will think about and see whatever the material is on the page as expanding beyond the boundaries of the page. And also, just thinking about your question, I'm also thinking about the way that other concrete poets have engaged with the space of the page or reimagined the space of the page, and even thinking about Steve McCaffrey's Carnival, or J.R. Carpenter's work about islands. It has this, I think both, really imagine the space of the page to move well beyond, the usual kinds of parameters that we imagine, and I'm totally into that. Cool. Thank you for the question.
Well, and I note that we're getting near 4 o'clock.
Are we almost out of time? Okay.
And you've been answering questions for a nice chunk of time. So I think and that was a beautiful question upon which to really conclude for the page lecture this year, having you reflect on the page. And so what I would like, before we thank our visitor, is for everyone to note that there are chapbooks from the page lecture series to be picked up by the door. There's a beautiful gallery of Johanna Page's artwork online. There are many books by Jordan that can be picked up through your favorite purveyor of books, perhaps Novel Idea. And there will be refreshments coming in shortly. We'll have time to kind of catch our breath, move some paintings out of the way so they are not at all damaged. But we would love to stick around and have further conversations with everyone and spend some time together thinking about literature and its beauty. But please join me in thanking Jordan Abel.
Oh, yeah, totally. I'm glad you had an eye on the time.
Once the students get comfort and ask, they can ask forever.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll let them come up and have conversations with you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do so.